Recording in progress.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Tom Hunter Pratt. I'm the Multimedia Specialist for the ICN. I'm going to give a few seconds for everyone to come into the webinar, and I have a few announcements. So everyone is in listen-only mode. You are all muted by default. At the end of today's webinar, you will receive a pop-up asking you to complete a short survey. So your feedback is very valuable to us. We ask that you go ahead and click that link and take the survey at the end of the webinar. If you missed the survey, you will be receiving follow-up links within 24 hours of the end of this webinar. And the links will also contain the survey, and it will contain a recording of today's webinar as well. And that will get to your inbox within 24 hours of the end of the webinar. You will also be receiving a certificate within 24 hours of the webinar, so we'll be sending those out as well. So look for that in your inbox. Throughout the presentation today, we will be taking questions. So find the Q&A box within your Zoom control panel and any questions you have there, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So at the very end, we'll have a Q&A session, but go ahead and put any questions you have in during each panelist presentation, and we'll be able to get to those at the end, and we also may answer those through text throughout. So any questions you have, put those in the questions box, in the Q&A box, and you'll find that Q&A button on your Zoom control panel. That's all I have for you today. I'm going to turn the presentation over to Chef Patrick.
Good afternoon. I am Patrick Garmong with the Institute of Child Nutrition, and I would like to welcome you to the July CICN webinar, Menu Strategies for Special Diets and Allergens. During today's webinar, all attendees are muted. There will be time for questions at the end of the presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the question box on your screen. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but due to our time constraints, every question may not get answered during the webinar. Individuals who have registered for the webinar will receive an email at the conclusion of the webinar. The email contains the webinar recording link and a link to the evaluation survey. Please complete the evaluation survey. ICN will send out these certificates within 24 hours. To assist in meeting the unique training, technical assistance, and professional development needs of school nutrition professionals, ICN has launched the Culinary Institute of Child Nutrition initiative to assist child nutrition professionals develop goals and implement best practices to improve the culinary aspect of program operations. The ICN has also launched a new CICN website. Visit the Culinary Institute of Child Nutrition's website for tips and strategies for preparing and serving healthy culinary-inspired school meals. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Menu Strategies for Special Diets and Allergens. To quickly go over our professional standards codes and SNA key areas, we'll be covering nutrition, which is level 1000 under our USDA professional standards codes. Specifically, we're focusing on menu planning, the 1100 code, and the planned menus to accommodate students requiring special diets, including food allergies, 1160. Our SNA key area for today is key area 1, nutrition. My name is Chef Patrick Garmong. I am the facilitator of today's webinar. I am the Associate Director of Culinary Education and Training for the Institute of Child Nutrition. I now want to welcome all of our panelists that will be joining us. First, we have Christy Grimm. Christy has been an integral part of FAIR, which is the Food Allergy Research Education organization. She's been an integral part of their education efforts since January of 2014. She was initially brought on to create FAIR's college program, which aims to bridge the communications and resource gap between college staff and students transitioning onto these campuses. The building of this program, which ultimately led to the creation of a self-audit tool for dining services, best practices for colleges and universities, and an annual food service conference, and student resources like FAIR College Food Allergy Search, further highlighting the desperate need for additional resources to support the dedicated professionals the food allergy community must rely on for safety and inclusion. And the years since then, Christie's scope of work has expanded to include fair trainings and resources for patients, and a variety of allied professionals. This includes overseeing content for FAIR's educational conferences, FAIR Food Allergy Academy, FAIR's learning platform for live and on-demand training, on-demand content. Next, we want to welcome Janelle Walker-Conway. Janelle is a nutritionist for the USDA Food Distribution Division, where she is responsible for providing technical guidance for nutrition-related issues in USDA foods and child nutrition programs, the Emergency Food Assistant Program, the Commodity Supplemental Food Program, and the Food Distribution Program on Indian reservations. Prior to joining USDA, Janelle worked to improve access to healthy food in underserved communities in DC as the Director of Nutrition and Community Outreach at DC Central Kitchen, where she was named one of the 50 under 50 innovative leaders transforming Metro DC's food system in 2015. Janelle received her bachelor's degree in dietetics from the University of Maryland, College Park, and her master's of public health degree from University of Massachusetts, Amherst. And we'd also like to welcome Angela Gomez. Angela is the nutritionist for Laveen School District in Arizona. And I have lost the rest of her introduction, so I apologize. But Angela has a wealth of experience in planning menus to serve children with special dietary issues, and will be providing some practical insight today on how she applies those practices in her school. So our learning objective today is, after the webinar, participants will identify strategies to increase and enhance special diet and allergen-aware menu items in their food service operations. So before we get into any content, we want to launch a poll question here. So Tom Hunter's going to load that up for us. And our poll question is, when planning menus for students with allergies, what presents the most significant challenge for your menu planner? Is it sourcing ingredients, creating menus with variety, finding and or developing recipes that meet your needs, sourcing pre-prepared food items, so that might be some convenience items that you can put on your menu, or is it training staff on how to safely prepare allergen-aware foods? We're going to go ahead and leave the poll open for about another 30 seconds. It looks like we've got almost 300 responses already. It looks like right now creating menus is one of the top areas of need. So I'm glad you're here for that, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'll give it about 10 more seconds. All right, so it looks like creating menus with a variety is definitely the biggest challenge. So we'll be addressing a lot of those things today, and training staff on how to safely prepare allergen-aware foods comes in second. And we'll be providing you all with some information on that here in just a moment. All right, so I do want to note that today's webinar will not go into detail regarding specific food safety concerns or regulatory language covering special diets. The ICN has a wealth of food safety resources specific to allergens that can be found at theicn.org. We also have a QR code that's embedded here that you can scan on your mobile device and be able to direct you to those resources. Those will help you tremendously with some of those staff training issues that were identified. I also am going to enter into the chat real quick a link to access the ICN's training page to be able to access the ICN's a variety of different ICN trainings, and that information will be that page will be able to steer you in the right direction on how to request some great trainings to help you train your staff on how to prepare allergen-friendly foods. So unfortunately, when it comes to allergens, there's no singular strategy to menu planning. The number of allergens at a feeding site can be more diverse than the students we serve. Some students may have a single food allergy, or they may have 8+ allergies that can cause a reaction, which means we need a diverse approach in order to each student receives a safe, appetizing, and healthy meal. The crux of providing safe, appetizing, and healthy meals is customer service. At the core of our program, we are running the largest food service business in our communities. And in that, we've got a captive audience of customers that we want to make sure we're taking care of and treating equitably and fairly, and making sure that they have access to healthy and nutritious foods while they're dining with us. So in doing so, it gives us an opportunity to make sure that we're providing outstanding customer service to our students. I do want to go over a couple of regulatory pieces just really quickly to help understand how customer service plays into what we're doing. So the USDA's non-discrimination regulation 7 CFR 15B discusses how food service, and in providing food service to any of its students or recipient to which the subpart applies, may not discriminate on the basis of a handicap. So recipients shall serve special meals at no extra charge to students whose handicap restricts their diet. Recipients may require students to provide medical certification that special meals are needed because of their handicap. I am going to enter into the chat a PDF that outlines those regulations, so please feel free to visit that. We will not be discussing those in detail today, but this resource is available here for you. The next area we're going to discuss is Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 is a national law that protects qualified individuals from discrimination based on their disability. People who have a history of or who are regarded as having a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities are also covered. And this includes a life-threatening food allergy. So I'll be including the 504 information in the chat as well, if you'd like more information on that. The reason that we're highlighting these is it's our obligation to ensure that we're feeding students safely and that we're feeding them in an appropriate manner when they come to dine with us. So we also want to address the requirements for meal modifications. The USDA's regulations for school nutrition programs require that all meals served to children must comply with appropriate meal pattern for each child nutrition program. For grades K through 12 in the National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program, the meal pattern also include weekly dietary specifications, which we understand to be nutrition standards. However, food substitutions and other reasonable modifications to the meal patterns may be necessary to meet the dietary needs of children who qualify as having a disability under any of the federal non-discrimination laws, are eligible for special education under the IDEA, or do not qualify as having a disability under any of the federal non-discrimination laws, but have other special dietary needs. The USDA's meal patterns do not apply to modified meals for children whose disability restricts their diet. However, meals that consist only of texture modifications, such as chopped, ground, or pureed foods, must meet the meal patterns. In addition, optional meal modifications for children without disabilities must always comply with meal patterns. So the process of providing modified meals for children with disabilities should be as inclusive as possible. It is essential that school food service personnel work with the children's parents or guardian to ensure the child receives a safe meal and has an equal opportunity to participate in the school nutrition programs. The USDA strongly encourages local education authorities to develop a Section 504 team to discuss best practices and develop a more holistic plan to create a safe learning environment for all children. So in doing that, this provides us a really strong opportunity to start moving into providing great customer service. And when we're starting to create our 504 teams, it's important to include as many stakeholders as possible. And this includes our students and their parents, and they can help us guide a better way to meet that child's needs. So when we're in our 504 meeting, we want to start meeting our customers where they are. We want to allow the students to self-advocate, identifying the foods that they like to eat. We can get recipes from parents or guardians of the products that children will eat so that we can start incorporating those into our menus and identifying foods that they actually enjoy and are safe to utilize, that they're utilizing in the home. And we also, in that moment, want to be honest about any limitations your program may have. it could be you may be in a very rural area and have challenges sourcing ingredients. Be honest about your limitations as they're being honest about theirs, and you end up creating a more dynamic approach because everyone's on the same page when you're discussing these issues. Another idea you can put together an advisory group to help advocate for menus for children and get informed feedback from your stakeholders. And these advisory groups could include a mix of parents and children. And we want to make sure that the parents become vocal advocates, not just for their children, but in turn, they become vocal advocates for your child nutrition program as you're meeting their needs and working with them to help identify what their children need. It's a great way to break down a lot of barriers and perceptions that exist about the program. If we're not communicating regularly with our stakeholders, they're free to ruminate on whatever, whatever their perception may be. When we're meeting our stakeholders and our customers where they are and bringing them in to be part of the equation, we're going to be able to start crafting menus that really meet those children's needs. And I think it's just essential that we're providing customer service to these students. They are customers at the end of the day. And if there's one single strategy to creating menus that work well for our students with special diets and allergies, it's communication. It's communicating with them. It's creating a holistic approach to feeding these children in a way that is going to make them feel safe, comfortable, and well-nourished at the end of the meal service. Next, I'm going to pass it off to Christy Grimm with FAIR, which is the Food Allergy Research Education Program. Christy, welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Let me just get my presentation loaded here. All right, so Patrick, you and I, same wavelength here. I was watching you present and I was like, oh, I was going to say that too. As Patrick said, I'm also not going to go into the weeds on disability laws and how they apply here, but I did just want to start by talking about the why. We know, we are a food allergy advocacy group. We're in it to protect and help enhance the lives of our constituents, but we know it's not always easy to accommodate these particular issues. And so that being said, there's good reasons to do it, starting with it is required under the law. Americans with Disabilities Act does define a disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. Eating is certainly a major life activity. In the case of a life-threatening food allergy, in the event of a reaction, there are many more major life activities that could be involved, like breathing. So these are important issues. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, I won't go into it because Patrick so beautifully summarized it for you, but I will just say that the Office of Civil Rights for the Department of Education, which is the enforcer for this particular legislation, does specifically highlight food allergy and diabetes as two hidden disabilities that Section 504 applies for. So there's not really a question that this is covered under this law. And then you may also have additional state laws that cover this issue. So this all kind of boils down to food allergies and other conditions that require special dietary needs must be accommodated under federal and state laws. So beyond the legal reasons to accommodate, it's also the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for safety. It's the right thing to do for inclusion. It is the right thing to do for equity. And I just want to play a little bit of a clip of a video with kids talking about what it's like to have a food allergy in their own words.
What's the best part of having a food allergy? Nothing. I can't have milk, I can't have pizza, or taco chip cookies, and my vanilla cookies, and strawberries.
I'm allergic to dairy, egg, wheat, oat, rye, barley, tree nuts, sesame, sunflower, chia, flax.
It's been really nerve-wracking because I'm really paranoid about things. So whenever I go to a restaurant, I'm like, wait, does it have nuts? Oh no, wait, what am I gonna do? So that happens a lot to me. I'm very cautious.
Well, since I had allergies at a young age and I would have to bring around my epi everywhere, and it was kind of scary knowing that I would have to stick a needle, the epi, into my leg at some point, and I was really little and I didn't want to do that.
Once I started to get hives and my throat started to hurt and I had to go to the hospital. Sometimes when I'm eating something I'm not so sure about and I'm nervous that I'm going to start having an allergic reaction. It's scary.
Well, it's hard because you can't eat the things other people eat.
Well, sometimes when we would like make a project at school with food, I wouldn't be able to do it because it would have food that I was allergic to and I felt left out. At school, people are just say, oh, I don't have it. When I talk about my allergy, some people in my class say, I don't have any allergies, and it just makes me feel a little sad.
Well, when I was 5 or 6, I told my mom that I didn't want to be remembered for the kid with food allergies. I wanted to be remembered as like a great gymnast or a kid who did something great or someone who changed the world or just made the world a better place.
So I play that video for you just to sort of re-emphasize how important empathy is to this process. And I want you to take a minute and just really think about what it would be like if every single time you took a bite of food, that food had the potential to take your life. Or if you're a parent, imagine if you had to entrust the life of your child to a stranger who may or may not understand food allergies. And the thing that you needed to live, you have to eat, might also be the thing that could ultimately take your life. So these are serious issues. You know it's a safety issue, but just thinking about that real emotional impact that this can have on people. And on top of the safety issue, food is a key part of safety and inclusion. If you think about major life events or even small life events that you participate in, from children's birthday parties to holiday family dinners, to trick-or-treating, to classroom crafts, as we saw one of the children mention in that video, these things often include food. So if we're excluding kids with special dietary needs, they are missing out on a lot of things. On top of that, this is an issue of equity. So there are some real racial and economic disparities here. We know that children in lower income brackets are about 2.5 times more likely to end up in the ER or the hospital than children from middle or high income brackets based on a food allergy reaction. Black children are 2 to 3 times more likely to suffer fatal anaphylaxis than their white counterparts. And about 8% of children in the US have food allergy, but fewer than 1% of children on Medicaid have been diagnosed. That suggests that a lot of these low-income children are walking around with food allergies that have not been officially diagnosed, which is another thing I'd really think about as you're thinking through the 504 process and what sort of documentation that you require. On top of that, as we know, COVID has really further impacted some of these economic disparities. Feeding America projects that in 2020, 15 million children faced food insecurity, and they expect about 13 million children will face food insecurity in 2021. 21% of Black individuals will experience food insecurity in 2021 versus 11% of white individuals. And what that boils down to for school food service is that now more than ever, some of these children will be relying on school to provide a safe meal for them. So I hope I've convinced you of the why if you weren't already convinced. I think you're here, so you probably already were committed to this. But how do you do it? And as Patrick said, communication is absolutely key. So trust has to be the foundation. Even if you can safely serve these children and their families, if they don't believe that, that's going to be a huge barrier to them accessing these foods. So the goal is to provide your students and their families with accurate information in addition to the safe food. You want to set yourself up for success with a solid base of allergen controls and a menu that can more broadly accommodate your students. And that really begins with purchasing controls. So you want to ensure you have a complete and accurate ingredient information about all the food you purchase. And yes, that does include down to the sub-ingredients. And I believe that Janelle will be going into some of the resources you have for that, so I won't dive too deep into it. You want to have a substitution policy in place with pre-approved substitutions to avoid surprises. That means looking at your products in advance and knowing which ones you'll approve as substitution that have a similar allergen profile to the original product. This will limit unexpected allergens popping up. And then you want to ensure that when ingredient changes do happen, I mean, we're realistic. I know that things go out of stock or they don't come into the facility as expected. So changes are going to happen, but if they do, those have to be communicated to your students and their families. If you can look at your menu and do an analysis, you want to identify sources of common allergens in your menu. And then look for ways to offer customization where you can. This can be really simple tweaks, like offering multiple salad dressing options, always served on the side in individual containers or packets. You also need to look at your facility to identify and address problem areas. Things like shared fryers, shared cooktops can make a food that would otherwise be safe, unsafe for your students. And then, as Patrick said, we want to ensure that all staff is properly trained on safe food preparation for special diets. It is very, very easy to ruin a safe meal with just one mistake in the kitchen. When you're looking at your recipes, we want to have standardized recipes that are established. And the reason for this is it really helps to ensure that the information you are conveying to your students is accurate. If you're relying on memory or people are going off recipe frequently, that can create a real problem for accurate information. You want to identify ingredient swaps that would make your overall menu more allergy friendly. So if you look at these two nutrition labels here, the one on the left introduces fish, anchovies. The one on the right doesn't. So if you can look at simple recipes, these are two different Worcester sauce options. If you can choose the one that limits the common allergens, all of a sudden you've made your overall menu more allergy friendly to begin with. And I don't think I have to say it, but don't forget taste. Children with food allergies like good food too. They don't want to just eat plain food that doesn't taste good. And recipe adherence. So I know people like to get creative. This is actually one of the things that we frequently hear is, how do I get the chef not to try and do something different or mix something up in the kitchen? They like to be creative. They like to go off recipe. And I would just say that this is really, really dangerous if they're doing it. So helping them understand the importance of adhering to the recipe. Simple changes. Maybe they decide to throw an egg wash on a pizza crust before they pop it in the oven. Maybe they've decided to butter a bun that didn't call for it. And these are small changes, but they could introduce an allergen where there wasn't one already. Getting a centralized source of information that pulls together recipes and ingredients. This helps ensure accuracy and makes accommodations easier in the long run as you're looking at your menu changes. So I know there are some very expensive programs that you can do this with. There are also in simple Excel sheet if you want to go that route. So there are a lot of different ways to centralize your database of ingredients. Once you know what is in your food and you have minimized common allergens in your overall menu, you're in a much better position to accommodate a variety of dietary restrictions. So as you're looking at the overall strategies for your school district, one thing, and Patrick said this too, and I completely agree, is that this is not a one size fits all. Every school district is different. Your student populations might be different. So you really need to look at the needs of your district and decide on some high level strategies. Does it make sense for your district to ban particular allergens? Does it make sense to have a separate allergy friendly menu that you start from? The only thing I would caution is if you are doing a separate allergy friendly menu, please make sure that it is equitable. You do not want to be serving all of your students pizza, which everyone's going to be excited about, and then have a salad or a sandwich for your food allergy kids. You want to choose your ingredients very carefully. So looking at the specific ingredients and then the sub-ingredients within those in your menu and making swaps anywhere you can to limit the common allergens. I think we all know that sauces and condiments very frequently introduce allergens, but even as you think about what bread you're going to source, a lot of places will have gluten-free breads or pastas, but they could also be looking at those for egg and soy content. And then meats and cold cuts, I think, surprise some people that those can have allergens in them unexpectedly. So just making sure that you're very carefully looking at the ingredients that you're using and where it's feasible, swapping them out. And then last but not least, transparency, again, goes a long way towards building trust. So it does not matter if you can accommodate your students, if they don't feel safe, if their family doesn't feel safe having them eat in your facility, then those efforts aren't going to be worth it. So you need to make sure that you are being open, transparent, communicating with them honestly, be honest about the efforts that you've made. As Patrick said, if you have challenge areas, be honest about those too. People really do appreciate the honesty. And then to add, put the information online. So people are looking at your website for information. If they don't see it, they're coming in possibly assuming that you have nothing in place when in fact that may be the opposite of what's true. And remain flexible. So the goal of limiting the common allergens in your overall menu, the goal of training your staff so that they are very aware of cross contact, the goal of all of these things is to limit the need for individual food accommodations to make your overall menu more accessible to the bulk of your students, but it's never going to completely eliminate the individual food accommodations. So when you think about how you're approaching this, instead of starting with an exasperated or frustrated, what can you eat? Instead, you might ask, what do you like to eat? And use that as the starting point. Building recipes based on what the kids like to eat, what they feel safe eating, That can lead to a higher customer service or customer satisfaction. And also it will help them understand that you are their ally. So we want this to be a collaborative relationship and not a contentious one. So the more that you can show them that you really are on their side, you're doing this with their best interest in mind, the better that relationship will go. And just to sort of rehash what we've talked about here, empathy is absolutely key. So people are really entrusting you with the health and safety of their children. There is nothing more important than that. So I just encourage you to sort of keep that piece of it in mind, even during the frustrating conversations, or if it feels like someone's being unreasonable to you, remember that this is the lives of their children. Consider the specific needs of your school district and your school district. Not every school is the same. So you want to think about that in your overall menu strategies. Solicit feedback. This has to be a collaborative process. You want to include the voice of the student and the voice of their families. So consider using surveys or focus groups or advisory councils, as Patrick mentioned, and one-on-one meetings to understand what will really work for your student body. Again, be transparent. Trust is absolutely key. Transparency is a must. So you want to be open and honest with your students and their families. And then always keep in mind that you are accommodating individuals. So it's easy to get caught up in the high level policy, but this is really about individual specific students. And so as you're looking at those accommodations, you really need to collaborate with the family and the student to find a plan that works for them. And I'll add just as a closing note, I know that this is not always easy. I know that it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to train your staff constantly. But it does make a difference. So thank you so much for everything that all of you do to keep your students safe and included. And with that, I will throw it over to Janelle.
Thank you, Christy. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my my slides and just say good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much for attending today's webinar. My name is Janelle, and I hope you all can see my screen, my slides okay. I'm a nutritionist with the USDA Food and Nutrition Services Food Distribution Division. And today I'm going to discuss USDA foods available for schools and how to locate allergen and ingredient information for these products now and in the future.
Hey,
So
Janelle,
yes.
I'm sorry for interrupting. Can you move a little bit closer to the microphone?
Sure, absolutely. Is that
Thank
better?
you. Yes.
All right. So first, I'm going to provide background information about USDA foods in schools and the 3 ordering options that are available. I'll then review where to currently find allergen and ingredient information for our direct delivered products using product specifications, product information sheets, and product packaging. Finally, I'll introduce a new and exciting initiative that will provide stakeholders with greater access to nutrition, allergen, and ingredient information for these products in the future. And this will be through our GS1 project. So first, let's talk about USDA foods in schools and what ordering options may be available to you in your state or school district to spend your entitlement dollars. So USDA foods are foods that are purchased by USDA from American farmers, dairymen, ranchers, and fishermen to support nutrition assistance programs in American agriculture. Now, states and school districts can order USDA foods through 3 different options, either direct delivered USDA foods, bulk USDA foods that can be sent to processors, and the USDA DoD Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. So it's important to keep in mind that all 3 options and their availability to school districts are determined by the state agency. So direct delivered USDA foods, these are formerly known as brown box. These items tend to be minimally processed and focus on basic food components that can be used by districts with a variety of different needs and student food preferences. So they are delivered directly to states and school districts and can be used on their own or as ingredients in a recipe. The bulk for processing items are bulk ingredients such as apples, chicken, or 100% whole wheat flour, and these items are sent to approved processors to make into finished end products for states or school districts, such as apple muffins or chicken nuggets. And then lastly, the USDA DoD Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program supplies fresh produce that can be delivered directly to school districts. So I want to talk briefly about the differences between direct delivery and bulk for processing options. Now, both options can be found on the USDA foods available list that you see here and on our website. On the list, products are broken down by category, and the items that are highlighted in yellow are bulk for processing items, and those that are not highlighted yellow are direct delivered items. So there are over 30 bulk for processing items available on our foods available list. And as I mentioned earlier, these are bulk ingredients that are delivered directly to the processor. So the USDA establishes specifications for these bulk ingredients, but not for the end products that are made by the processors. So it is up to the school district to evaluate the available processed end products and develop specifications and conduct the procurement for those end products. So if you're looking for ingredient and allergen information of processed end products, you would need to contact the processor directly or look at their website. For our direct delivery items, there are over 150 direct delivery items available on our foods available list. These items are intended to be versatile for food preparation at the school district level. They typically come in institutional size packaging, such as number 10 cans of peaches, 30-pound cases of frozen corn, and 30-pound cases of shredded mozzarella cheese. So for these products, the USDA establishes a specification that may have nutrient limits such as fat, sodium, or sugar, and may also list excluded allergens such as no gluten, no soy, or no peanuts. USDA, we've made significant efforts to update the allergen requirements and product specifications to exclude allergens where possible. So, for example, many protein products now contain no gluten and no soy statements, and canned vegetables and beans must be free from all major allergens. Now, when these statements are included, USDA can confidently state that the product is free from the allergen in question, as compared to when the specification does not mention allergens and the product components may vary based on that vendor formulation. So USDA, we're continuing to access vendor production practices and add this language where relevant. So now we have covered the bases. I want to spend some time to dive a little bit deeper into where you can find allergen information for direct delivered USDA foods. As I mentioned before, some product specifications include certain major allergens. If you are looking to see if the product you're interested in contains an allergen exclusion statement, you can visit the Agricultural Marketing Service website under Commodity Procurement to view the product specification. Products can be searched by food type, such as fruits, vegetables, eggs, cheese, and dairy, and by form, such as canned, frozen, and dried. So here's an example of the specification for grilled chicken fillets. Allergen exclusion language such as soy and gluten are not allowed is usually contained in the processing section of the specification for protein products such as turkey, chicken, and pork. Or you can find this language in the allergen section of the specification for vegetables and beans. The other resource that is available to learn more about our direct delivered products are on our product information sheets. These can be found on the Food and Nutrition Service website through the link you see here, organized by food group. Now, products can be identified by their USDA food description and WebSCM material code. So here we have an example of the product information sheet for our Alaska pollock fish sticks. And by looking at the allergen information section, you see that these whole grain rich fish sticks contain fish and wheat across all vendors that supply this product. Now, this section will reflect known allergens or allergen exclusions based on the specification requirements or the vendor provided information. Now, keep in mind that multiple vendors supply each product offered on the foods available list, and some vendors may have different formulations or ingredients. Therefore, we encourage states and school districts to always verify the vendor-specific information on the product package upon receipt. You can also request information directly from the vendor or view on their website, but verifying allergen statements on the actual product label of the package once received remains best practice. That brings us to the last and most important step in verifying allergen information for a particular product, and that's checking the package upon receipt. The list you see here are the minimum requirements for primary packaging as defined by FDA and FSIS. One of those requirements is that an allergen declaration must be included if allergens are present. Thus, USDA food vendors are expected to have allergens listed in the cases of products if allergens are present. If this information is missing, but you believe an allergen is present, such as in the case of receiving fish sticks, but fish is not listed as an allergen, please contact the USDA Foods Complaint Team at the USDA Foods Complaints at USDA.gov email. If you receive a product that contains an unexpected allergen, please consult with the dietitian, the school nurse, or other designated point of contact with any questions. Additionally, products may contain or include may contain statements, also known as allergen advisory labeling. This usually is used in processing plants where many different products are produced and there's a potential for cross contact with an allergen. If some of those other products contain peanuts and tree nuts, you could see a may contain traces of peanuts statement in addition to the allergen declaration. If you have any questions, please contact us at USDA-foods@USDA.gov. So now I want to take some time to go over a new initiative, the GS1 Nutrition, Allergen, and Ingredient Project coming this year, which will make nutrition, allergen, and ingredient information for select USDA Foods direct delivery products readily available for states and school districts. So the purpose of this project is to make nutrition, allergen, and ingredient information available for USDA food products for National School Lunch Program participants. And to do so, we are leveraging an existing partnership with GS1 through the Agricultural Research Service Branded Foods Database to collect vendor-specific nutrition information to provide to states and school districts. Now, this information will help to inform menu planning decisions and assist school districts in developing menus that are compliant with federal recommendations for school meals. So FNS will post all nutrition, allergen, and ingredient information received by vendors in a spreadsheet that will be made available on the FNS public website and updated monthly. Vendors will be responsible for updating this information if there's a change in their formulation that impacts the nutrients, the allergens, or the ingredients. This will allow states and school districts access to the latest nutrient, allergen, and ingredient information at will. And it will also allow them to compare information across vendors. So as it relates to allergens, if you see that the product from one of the vendors contains an ingredient or allergen that you don't want to serve, we just recommend not ordering that product. So due to federal procurement requirements, USDA cannot guarantee that a state will receive a product from a particular vendor until the bid has been awarded. So there is a chance you could receive product from the vendor you do not approve of. So it's just best to go with the products where all vendors listed include a nutrient profile and ingredients and allergens that meet the need of your state or school district. So let's take a brief look at what the spreadsheet will look like. We've provided a screenshot of what school districts will have access to on our public website. When a school district opens the file, they'll select the food category. They'll then select the material code that they're interested in. And then once the material code is selected, they will be able to see the nutrition, allergen, and ingredient information for all of the vendors that have entered information for that material. So states and school districts will be able to compare this information across all vendors. And since some school districts are unsure of who the vendor will be when they place their order, this will allow them to determine if this material is an item they can successfully incorporate into their menu. The second image is a screenshot of the remainder of the spreadsheet. It displays the allergens, it identifies the kosher certification, and it also lists all the ingredients. Additionally, there's a field from when the vendor last updated the product information, and there is a date in the bottom right corner that indicates when the state or school district accessed this information. So these dates allow us to inform the school district when the vendor has provided an update and when they last accessed the information. So we will be hosting a webinar on August 5th to provide more details on this new initiative. We plan to transition to the new spreadsheet later this year, so please continue to use the current methods to obtain nutrition, allergen, and ingredient information as we implement this new initiative. So for updates on this and other USDA foods and schools related topics, please sign up for our e-letter at the link you see here. And just to provide a quick review, product specifications and product information sheets are resources that are available to help you identify allergens in USDA foods directly labeled products. You can also request this information directly from the vendor or view it on their website, but verifying allergen statements on the actual product label of the package once it is received remains the best practice. We are continuing to work with industry to limit allergen use in certain products and to limit potential cross-contact with allergens. We want to reduce the number of may contain or allergen advisory labels on our products so you can be confident that the products you receive are free from potential allergens. USDA is working on making nutrient, allergen, and ingredient information more readily available to allow states and school districts to access vendor-specific nutrition information and assist with menu planning. FNS will host a webinar on August 5th to provide more details on this new initiative. So stay in touch with us by signing up for our e-letter. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A box. And I'm now going to turn it over to Angela. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janelle. I appreciate it. My name is Angela Gomez. I am the registered dietitian for the Laveen Elementary School District, and I'm going to talk about some practical ways for you to start implementing new strategies with their special diets. So can you relate to this? You get a new special diet and your mind is blank, like this tray here. I can totally relate to that, especially when I first started out with special diets. But today, I want to offer you some tips and some inspiration that maybe you can start adding to what you're doing, and hopefully this can serve as a resource for you. So let's get started. My objectives today that I'll be going over with you, I'll let you know how we're doing it at the Laveen Elementary School District, how we're developing special menus and special diets. I'll list the perks of managing special diets. I'm going to share 8 practical tips with you to kind of jumpstart your creativity. And then I hope that you'll be able to apply at least one of the tips that I mentioned, or maybe something you've been sitting on for a while. I hope you'll feel motivated to do it after this presentation. So just real briefly about Laveen Elementary School District. We are located within an urban village within the city of Phoenix. We have 9 elementary schools. They're all K through 8. And we have over 7,000 students currently enrolled. Of those 7,000, we have about 3.5% of those students are on special diets. And I just wanted to note that this includes our vegetarian students as well. We group them in there and we take that seriously. So with special diets, a lot of times we talk about how challenging they can be or how hard they are, and they are. But I want to emphasize some of the perks of special diets, some of the perks for the families, for the students, and for you. So as you know, special diet foods can be really expensive for families, and not all families have access to that. So maybe that student that's coming into your cafeteria is, getting a chance to try a gluten-free blueberry muffin that they don't get at home. And in my experience, I don't know about your experience, but in my experience, a lot of the families don't have access to registered dietitians after diagnosis. And so families may be using your menu for inspiration. Some additional perks is that you're building trust with families. You're shining a positive light on school foods, which may ultimately increase your participation. And like Christy mentioned earlier, food is communal. And so you're helping these special diet students safely and comfortably participate in the social aspect of school foods. For us, I see it as an opportunity to learn more about food allergies and intolerance. And it's an opportunity to support and serve families even more, especially when they need it with these special diets and life-threatening allergies. And I think a really great way to look at special diets is that it's a great way to practice some speed scratch cooking if you're not already on a smaller scale. So rather than cooking for 1,000 plus students, speed scratch cooking, you can really try and start small with just a couple of special diet students. Now, our special diet menus, we try to align them as much as possible with the regular menu. This is for student inclusion. It saves storage space. It reduces food waste. It ultimately makes it easier on the staff that's preparing the meals as well. And then we do create special diet menus for various meal programs. And so that's something to keep in mind. And pictured here, I have the bean and cheese tostada. This is a gluten-free menu option that can be on the regular menu and can also be made dairy-free by taking out the cheese from the refried beans or just not sprinkling some on top. So I'll separate the allergen menus that I work with into two separate ones. So I'll have the single allergen menus and then the multiple allergen menus. So the single allergen menus, I developed those for the entire school district. It's about a 4-week cycle. The ones I usually tackle each school year are the gluten-free, the dairy-free, the egg-free. And then for vegetarian, I just kind of indicate to staff which entrees are either already vegetarian or can be vegetarian items. And I really use these single allergen menus as base menus, so I can build off them with the multiple allergen menus. It's important to remind myself and to remind you that researching substitution for holidays, foods, and special celebration meals is really important when developing your menu cycles and recipes. It's also important to include desserts, condiments, salad dressings, so that special diet students are really getting that full scope of the meal. And again, I'm trying to be creative as possible, and I'll share some tips with you on what I do just to avoid flavor fatigue. I know this is a busy slide, but I wanted to give you an example of one of the egg-free menus that we used this past year. And on the second page, I actually, all this information I got from FAIR. I love FAIR so much. I'm also a FAIR Check certified instructor, so I'll scream their praises all day long. But I copied this from them. And then some of their resources that they have on there are translated into Spanish, which is incredibly helpful to not only the families that we serve here in the Laveen School District, but also to our staff whose primary language is Spanish. So this is a way to help keep it safe for the students, and just a really easy thing to do on the second page of the menu. All right, so now let's tackle the multiple allergen menus. These are the tough ones, right? These are the ones that are individualized to the student, really customized to the customer. I aim still for that 4-week cycle when possible to avoid that flavor fatigue. 2-week is my minimum. I have had to do 1-week cycles, which makes me incredibly sad. But sometimes some of the diets are pretty restrictive, but usually I'm able to get somewhere between 2 to 4 weeks. And again, with these, I build off the base menus, and it helps save time when I am putting together some of these special diet menus. So for instance, if you have a student who has a gluten-free and has gluten-free and dairy-free needs, I'll look at both of those menus and try to line them up with the regular menu. Here's another example here. So on the regular menu and the blue tray on the left is our turkey tachos. And actually at the previous school district I work with, I was lucky enough to work alongside a wonderful chef, Chef Whitney, and she helped me develop a lot of recipes that could be translated into allergy friendly recipes. And this is one of them. It's delicious. I love it. You can take this gluten-free and you can take it dairy-free. If you wanted to make this gluten-free, I would recommend maybe removing the graham crackers, for instance, and replacing it with corn tortilla chips. And if that gluten-free student is able to have dairy, adding nacho cheese or shredded cheese, and it can be more of like a dip type meal, which students tend to like that, at least in my experience. And real briefly, I wanted to touch on the design of menus. So I'll have an example of one of my multiple allergen menus here in a second, but the goal is to make it as clear as possible so we can keep the students safe. This also helps build and maintain trust with the families. When they can see what we're doing, they know what to expect. And it really sets up our staff for success, which is what we want to do, right? As far as the actual design, I use Canva because it gives me a lot of visuals. I'm a very visual person. It helps with accessibility needs, different education levels, and when people might not speak English as their first language. And when I design menus, I'm designing them for many people to view, right? If possible, if you can, get the menus translated into another language. Again, this will help if staff doesn't speak English as their first language, and it'll also help with families who may not speak English as their first language. On the menus, I'll add food item numbers to take out any guesswork so that staff knows if there's a number that's been substituted to immediately call me so we can make sure that it's safe for the student. And then I keep the menus in a variety of places for staff to access. I'll touch on this real briefly. Christy already touched on this a good amount here, but I like to let staff know when in doubt, reach out. And that means that as the person who's taking on the special diets, that you really foster a culture that encourages questions and feedbacks from not only staff, but families as well. I think it's important to share the menus and food brands with families. This again involves them in the process and helps to build trust and keeping a constant communication loop, right? So this is an example of one of my multiple allergen menus. It's probably one of the most restrictive ones I have. And I just wanted to highlight in red, in the middle of the school year, the student had more restrictions placed, and I just had that empty spot in that Thursday. And I asked mom if there was something on the menu that we were serving that the student really, really liked. And the mom informed me it was the beef tacos. So I threw that on there another time in the week because that student is okay with that. I varied up the vegetables and the fruit with it. If your student's diet allows, you can also add different seasonings and different sauces here. Okay, so now if we're stuck, what do we do? Here's some 8 tips, real quick tips for you, inspiration tips. First, I encourage you to get rid of the notion of kid food. If we have a real narrow vision of kid food being only chicken nuggets and French fries, and then we have a kid with a special diet who already has a narrow scope of what they can eat, it really limits creativity. It's important to note that there are children all around the world eating foods that some people here consider adult foods in the US. Another tip is to start simple. So ask the family what they eat at home. This was shared with me with my previous director I worked with, and it was something that I never thought of. Just ask the families. And then of course, consider and add cultural foods whenever possible. Get to really know your audience. Who are you developing the menu and recipes for? The cultures, their age group, their grade. For instance, with high school students, you might be able to be a little bit more adventurous. They might like some more spicy foods. So keep that in mind when you're developing your special diet menus. Now, sometimes when I get stuck, I like to put the pieces of the puzzle together. So I think of little bits and pieces. Instead of thinking of the whole tray, I'm just thinking of one portion. So maybe I'm thinking of the grain or vegetable that they can eat and adding to that. Or maybe I'm thinking of the meat or meat alternate that they are able to eat, and then I build from there. And with the meats, it's great. There's different types, cuts, shapes, textures, seasonings. There's so many different ways that you can vary it up for them. Another thing is checking out your salad bar. Your salad bar can really complement your menu items for your special diet students, whether it's pico de gallo, some quick pickled veggies, that can help really dress up their meal. You can also think about the temperatures and textures. What are you alternating? Are you having crunchy toasted sandwiches and also cold sandwiches? You can think of a condiment and start from there. I've done that several times where I was like, okay, they can have this one condiment. How can I build?
It looks like we may have lost Angela there due to some technical difficulties. So we'll try to get her plugged back in. In the meantime, I would like to share some recipes that she shared with me to be able to share out with with all of you. These are recipes that she uses in her program. So let me get these loaded over for you all. And then we're going to go ahead and start with a little Q&A in the event that Angela is not able to return to us. So far we've got a grilled chicken Parmesan, a nacho snack pack, a sriracha curry cauliflower recipe, and the final one is those turkey taco taco turkey tachos that look so delicious on her slide. So hopefully Angela can join us back in. It looks like a lot of the questions right now are related to her sharing her copies of her menus. So if she's able to rejoin us, hopefully we can get her to share some of those with us. We got a question here from Allison Brown. How do you present these special meal dietary needs to students when they come into the cafeteria serving line? Do they ask for these meals? How does this work with your servers? So I think I'm going to answer, and then if other panelists want to jump in, I think the best way to indicate that is in your 504 meeting, when you're planning these meals for your students, indicate what that's going to look like in your different service operation. Again, there's no single strategy when it comes to allergens. So what may work at one feeding site in your district may not work at a different feeding site as well. So it's all about communication and making sure that you're meeting your customers where they're at, and it also works well for your staff. Looks like Angela's just about able to get back with us here. Her audio is reconnecting. Do anyone else have an answer to that question?
I would back up what you said, and then also add that a lot of it might be dependent on the age of the child. So it may not be appropriate to ask a 5-year-old to ask for their special dietary need, whereas it may be totally fine for a 14-year-old to do that. So just think about that as well, and talking to the parents and the students about what they're comfortable with, what they feel empowered to do, so they're not missing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Christy. Angela, we're going to turn it back over to you to finish up.
Fantastic. Thanks for your patience, everyone. I appreciate it. Okay, so I left off with starting with a condiment and building from there. Another thing you can do is you can really make the sides the star of a show with special diets. A lot of the kiddos can eat vegetables and fruits. So what can you do to dress those up a bit? Pictured here is a roasted buffalo cauliflower that we tried. We taste tested this past year and the students loved it, so we're throwing it on the menu, but that would be a great addition to a special diet menu, given that the kiddo can have all the ingredients in there. With special diets, so often we're thinking about subtraction and what the students can't have. And I want to encourage you, whenever you feel stuck, to think of addition. So think of what you can safely add. A great example of this is if you have a dairy-free student and you're removing the creamy texture, what are safe foods that will replace that creamy texture? It might be some white beans. If you're lucky at your school district, you're getting some avocado. It could be hummus. Think of what you can add. And some recipe inspiration that you can add to your toolbox here is build your own entrees. Thinking of those things, like with the tostadas earlier, the kiddos can have the beans on the side and then they can put the beans on their own corn tortillas, right? Pictured here is one of our protein style boxes. And this one in particular is egg-free, but you could also make this a gluten-free option. Protein bowls, and thinking of theme days brunch for lunch, which I'll show you here in a second. This is another one of our protein pack. It's egg-free, gluten-free, peanut and tree nut-free, and it's also soy-free. So it's a great option to have on the menu. This is the brunch for lunch theme. I had a lot of fun with this. I nerded out with this here. But all these are peanut and tree nut free items. You have on the far left dairy free, on the far right egg free, and in between is some gluten free options. So these could also be on the regular menu with just some easy switches for your kiddos with special diets. One of my other favorite things to do is to reinvent a favorite. So take, for instance, pepperoni pizza, gluten-free. We did a pizza pasta on the right, which is also happens to be dairy free for this particular student, but you could add some shredded mozzarella there. Can you do a baked potato that has, turkey pepperoni and cheese on there? Can you use a gluten-free English muffin as the crust? Just really thinking of some of the kiddos' favorites and then morphing that into a special diet friendly entree. So when you need inspiration, there are other places to look, right? So I recommend looking outside of school food service. I've actually had to do this before. I went to Yelp and I went and typed in the location Los Angeles, California, because I knew that they would have a lot of vegetarian and vegan options. And I looked for build your own type meals and then tried to piece together a recipe from there. And it was incredibly helpful. Then I searched for a similar recipe online if I didn't utilize my coworker, Chef Whitney. And then I made sure the recipe ingredients were safe, of course, turned it into a standardized recipe. I tested it, finalized it, and then it became a new special diet menu item. My final inspiration tip would be to connect and collaborate. So kind of look at what you have around you. Do you have culinary students on campus who could take on a project of helping you develop a school-friendly, allergy-friendly recipe? If you have a local chef who's a friend or that you can connect with, and we all know those people in our kitchens who are excellent cooks. Can we tap into them and see if they would like to help participate in creating new recipes? Of course, there's always research grant opportunities. Here at the Laveen Elementary School District, we are with the Lifetime Foundation and we're working with Chef Kent right now. And Chef Kent has been fantastic. I will definitely tap into him as a resource in the future to kind of come up with some new recipes with special diets. And I encourage you to apply for these grants so you have access to that as well. Of course, reaching out to other school districts, we're all in this together. And anyone that I've reached out to from other school districts has been incredibly helpful. So please do that. And then also get active on social media. Show people what you're doing really well with special diets and take a look to see what other school districts are doing for special diets for some inspiration. Another way to connect and collaborate is doing taste tests with special diet students in mind so that they can participate and they do feel included. Doing taste tests with staff. So are certain foods better hot or cold? I know for me, I do not like any kind of gluten-free bread product that is cold. I absolutely cannot stand it. But if you don't have to eat those foods, you may not know that. So you might have a great product that's just not prepared and served in the way that it should be. So I think it's important for the staff to try some of these foods as well. And then if you're feeling up to it, give it a try outside of school, whether you're going to a restaurant that offers some allergy-friendly meals, or you find a recipe and cook that at home. It'll help the creative juices flow, or at least it has for me. So I've offered you these 8 tips, and where do you go from here? Start small. I always encourage you to start small and start with something that's practical or that works for you. I might have mentioned something today that you're like, no way, we're not ready. And that's completely okay. Just choose one tip or idea. And maybe, again, this is one that you've already had that you want to implement. Assign a timeline. If you need to, which I always encourage, recruit some collaborators and then put it into place. So an example of that would be maybe the school year is like, I'm just going to add one new recipe to one of the special diet menus that really isn't that exciting. I also encourage you to be proactive year-long around. So looking for allergy-friendly products and recipes for the next school year constantly. Speaking with food manufacturers and requesting and encouraging them to make more of those products for your special diet students. And then like we did with the nacho pack and the tostadas, consider placing more allergy-friendly meals just on the regular menu to kind of make it a little bit more seamless. Thank you so much for listening to me and bearing with my technical difficulties. My contact information is listed here, my office phone number, email. Laveen Child Nutrition is on Instagram and Facebook. And then I also started a Facebook group. I didn't know who would be interested at all, but it's titled Special Diets for School Nutrition Professionals. And I just thought we could all help and kind of share tips with each other, answer any questions, and just be there to support one another. I'm going to turn it back over to Chef Patrick. Thank you again.
All right, thank you so much, Angela. So we're going to do a little bit of Q&A here. One of the first things that we have in the Q&A, we have quite a few of these questions, is if Angela would be willing to share some PDFs of her sample menus for people to be able to glean from. So hopefully she can throw a few of those in the chat for us. I uploaded your recipes when you had to step away for technical difficulties there for a minute. So hopefully folks have been able to download those and glean from those as well. If not, we'll identify a way to get those shared out with everybody. There's the next question here, and please panelists feel free to unmute and answer this as you choose. We kind of answered it earlier, but I think this one goes into a little bit more detail. Any recommendations for how to identify students without quote unquote labeling them when they come to get their alternative meal, their special diet meal? The motivation, what's the motivation there for staff, even subs, to know who needs the meals? So any strategies you all are using to have those kiddos get those meals without being overtly identified?
That's kind of a tough one. I'll jump in and just say, I think it sort of goes back to what we already talked about with it being pretty individual. So I've seen schools that will do things like have a photo of the child and what their allergies are, and it's kept sort of back behind so the food service staff can see it and they can match up the child coming through, make sure they're giving them the right food. Not every child, not every parent's going to be comfortable with that kind of strategy. So I think it just requires those conversations about what they want, what they're comfortable with. You know, is the kid willing to identify themselves when they come through the line? Are they not? Does everybody need to sort of memorize who the children, and depending on the size of the school, if you're not accommodating hundreds of students, maybe you can just learn and know each one. So it's not an issue.
Thanks, Christy. Our next question is, how do you deal with kids who have food intolerances but not food allergies? It's kind of a different set of questions there. Angela, looks like you got a good answer, hopefully.
Yeah, so here at the Laveen Elementary School District, we treat them the same. So if they have intolerances, they say they have a lactose intolerance, they're still going to be uncomfortable. And if, heaven forbid, if they get something and they have to run out of the classroom or have some kind of embarrassing situation, we don't want that. We want to prevent that. So with intolerances, we treat them the same as allergies. I do ask more questions of doctors when I'm able to, and families, to get more clarification. Again, with lactose intolerance, some kids just have to stay away from fluid milk and others have to stay away from milk and baked goods. So I always clarify that with the families. I break it down for them, like, okay, is this a fluid milk issue only? Can they have cheese? Can they have yogurt? And kind of go from there. So when the kids lactose intolerant, I might not do the dairy-free menu unless that's something that they need. I might tailor the regular menu just a tiny bit. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Angela. Tom Hunter, I'm getting a lot of questions about accessing the PDFs in the chat. A lot of folks are saying that they cannot see those in the chat. Is there anything we can do to try to upload those or get those out for folks?
Sure, we can provide an alternate way to access those. The reason why they may not be able to see those is either an older version of the Zoom desktop client, or either they could be on a tablet or smartphone. And I've noticed those aren't available on tablet or smartphone.
Okay, so we will find a way to get those out to all of our participants. Thank you all for asking about that. We got time for just maybe a couple more questions. One is, how do you store special diet ingredients in your cooler or freezer? Do you have a special separate area set aside for those food items?
I don't know if Angela wants to weigh in on what her school specifically does. I think this sort of runs the gamut. I would just encourage you to sort of evaluate your specific storage. So if you can keep those special dietary foods, if they're on shared shelving, keep them above the other food rather than below it, just in case of spills and things like that. If you're able to have a separate area, that's great, but I know space is often an issue. And then the other thing is, even if you have a separate area, just obviously keeping in mind, not every special dietary need or meal is free from the same thing. So it's not necessarily helpful to have a gluten-free and a milk-free and a peanut-free if everyone sort of, some of those meals are going to have the things that the other special dietary meals are avoiding. So make sure it's packaged, make sure it's sealed, make sure that it's protected and however it's stored. And again, as much as possible, storing it either on separate shelving or above the allergens that you're trying to avoid for that meal.
Thank you, Christy. Angela, do you have anything else to add from that?
No, Christy knocked it out of the park.
All right, awesome. Awesome. All right, wonderful. The last question that I saw in here that didn't have to do with the PDFs being uploaded, there was a question about how do you handle taste testing and what does that look like? I know Angela kind of touched on that a little bit, but is there anything else you'd like to add to that on how maybe you, inform students of what the item is without making it sound like, oh, it's an allergen friendly or allergen free item? I wouldn't like that because oftentimes maybe students just get they stray away, students that don't have allergies, just because they're worried that, it doesn't sound as appealing. So is there anything you all do to make it still sound appetizing and inviting and welcoming for all students?
So when I'm doing the taste test, and I don't know if this is the right answer or not, but I'll share what I do. I will say what it is. So say like it's creamy tomato soup, and they'll be like, there is milk in it. Would you like to try some? So I kind of just offer the allergen that I know is in it to the student. I give the pretty name first, and then I say that, and then they get the choice. And then they also don't have to disclose that way whether or not they have an allergy. Maybe they don't want to share, or maybe they don't want other kids to know.
Awesome, thank you. And then one last question. And I think this might go to Christy here with FAIR. It's a little more technical, but how do you determine if an item is nut-free? I run into manufacturers having a nut-free product, but will not claim that it is due to liabilities with the manufacturer. Is this a safe product to use?
Throwing the hard ones. So I wish I could answer that in a very straightforward way. And unfortunately, I just can't. I think if it's not labeled nut-free, but here's what I'll say. If it contains nuts, it has to say so on the label.
Right.
And so we do know that some products that have precautionary labeling will contain the thing that they caution about. So I think Janelle talked about precautionary labeling. You have to take that into account. If there's no precautionary labeling on it, the only thing I could suggest is reaching out to the manufacturer to ask them specifically about their processes. So is it that they're not labeling it nut-free, but they're still very confident in their processes? Or is it that they're not labeling it nut-free because they think there's a high likelihood of contamination, in which case they should put that on the label. But generally, if it doesn't say it contains nuts and there's no precautionary labeling, it might be fine, but the only way to really understand it is to talk to the manufacturer specifically.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, that concludes our webinar for today. Just a final reminder that today's webinar has been recorded and can be viewed on the ICN website at theicn.org. Please complete the evaluation for this webinar. The certificates will be mailed out within 24 hours, and we will be identifying a way to get you all of those great recipes and menus that Angela shared with us. So again, thank you so much to our panelists, Christy Grimm, Janelle Conway, Angela Gomez. It's been a pleasure working with each of you. And I hope everyone got a lot of great insight and information today. So thank you all so much. And this is Patrick Garmong signing off.